I don't feel like a special guest. I've had such amazing people precede me on this platform that I just feel like I'm thankful that you guys stuck around to the end. You guys should get, prizes just for being here at this hour. Thank you. Thank you, Saham, for inviting me. Thank you all for coming and supporting the cause of diversity. You know, coming from a background, as you saw, I've always felt very diverse. And I think that's what I want to talk about today. People say, people ask me now, they say, oh, you're a Muslim, right? And ever since accepting Islam publicly, I've heard a lot of people saying, oh, you're Muslim, oh, okay, or how long have you been a Muslim for? Or congratulations for accepting Islam, as though that's the true path of understanding. And yet, what is it to be a Muslim that's different from being a Christian, that's different from being a Jew, from being a Hindu, from being a Buddhist, from being someone who believes in the Creator? Are we not all created by the same mind? Are we not all created in the image of God, as it says in the Bible? The same Bible that the Quran is predicated in, that Muhammad comes to basically reteach the people who have forgotten the Old Testament, who have forgotten the teachings of Jesus Christ. Are these prophets not all mentioned in the Quran? So it's always been a question that I've kind of not wanted to address, because I feel when people ask me, oh, you're a Muslim, or they associate with being a Muslim, I felt, but you don't understand my whole point. When I went to Iran, I went 3 times. And the second time that I went there, I was basically having a conversation with my friends, and they said, well, why don't you accept Islam? I said, well, what does it mean to be a Muslim? They said, oh, well, to be Muslim means that you accept Muhammad as prophet. I said, that's it? I said, yeah. So if I accept that Muhammad was a prophet, I don't really take offense to the Quran. I find that it has most of the same teachings that are in the Old Testament, and a summation of some of the things from the New Testament, but pretty much it's closer to the Old Testament. It makes sense to me that Muhammad was a prophet in the same lineage, going back to Moses, Noah, Abraham. Yeah, okay, I accept Muhammad as a prophet. So does that make that makes me a Muslim? Yeah, actually it does. Oh, this is interesting. So really, what you're saying is that your faith is the Judeo-Christian culture, because let's not forget how much Islam actually preserved many of the teachings of the Western world. They preserved the Greek philosophers, the Greek philosophers, going back to Aristotle and Plato. They preserved their works. They preserved their science. In fact, there was a tremendous Islamic Renaissance that took place, especially in Spain, for those who know of Cordoba, in Spain, for example, in this beautiful melting pot of the Jewish, Christian, and Muslim traditions coming together and sharing knowledge. The Prophet Muhammad said, seek knowledge, even if it takes you to China, to the Far East. Seek knowledge everywhere. Knowledge is supposed to be the key of Islam, as far as this curiosity. So, at the point that I was in Iran, then I said, okay, so being a Muslim just means you accept Muhammad as the last prophet in this lineage that everyone recognizes as we're part of, this Judeo-Christian lineage. And Muhammad has basically just come to reinforce those ideas to people that either didn't know them or perhaps had forgotten about them. Certain principles that, for example, are embodied in the Constitution of Medina, which no one talks about when they talk about Islam. The Constitution of Medina is one of the first democratic constitutions of the Western world. Although it's Arabia, so people in the West, because of this colonial mentality, don't consider that part of the Western world or Western culture, even though Judeo-Christianity then wouldn't be part of Western culture either, would it? Because that's the Middle East. So our tradition is actually based in the Middle East, our Western tradition. So the Constitution of Medina, that's actually this beautiful document, is given by Muhammad when he has control of Medina, and says, actually we recognize every religion's right to worship. Because in the Quran it says there's no compulsion in religion. And the Constitution of Medina then reinforces that and says, actually, whether you're Jewish, Christian, pagan, you have the right to worship. We're not going to force you. We're going to protect you. And if you don't want to fight to preserve the Islamic society, you don't have to. So there's certain, these kind of documents and texts that have been forgotten from our history because something occurred post, I think, really with the Crusades. That was the beginning of it. But it really got worse when the Spanish expelled the Jews and the Muslims both from Spain, 1492, don't forget. When basically the Jews and Muslims were both expelled from Spain, both had been mistreated during the Crusade conflicts. And then, really with the end of the Ottoman Empire in the early 20th century, the concept of the intelligent, noble Muslim tradition got transformed into that of the savage because it played into the colonial paradigm that needed to be implemented by the British and French empires, who now wanted to take the place of the Ottomans in ruling this region. So in order to do so, when they carved up these lands, they gave Arabia to the Saudi family, and the French took Lebanon, Syria, and they gave Iraq to the king that was probably supposed to be on the throne of Arabia, and they completely screwed up the region. And then they created this country called Israel, and then Israel then became, well, larger than it was supposed to be at the founding, and wars then have been following since. But the point was that the colonial powers never wanted us in the West to see that these were our brothers in faith of the one God. Because you speak a different language, you can call it Jehovah, you can call it Allah, call it God, that which has no name. And they wanted to turn us against our brothers. And we've seen this throughout time. We see this in America, for example. It's what happened during slavery, when you had poor whites who were living in just as bad situations in the South as enslaved blacks. And the whole colonial mentality as well, we have to turn you against the black man, because if you ever relied on the principles of economic discrimination and disparity, you'd have overthrown the slave masters in a day. So we have to make you believe that there is the enmity of the other, who's darker skinned, who doesn't speak your language, who doesn't have your religion. And if he has your religion, then let's justify it and say, well, the black man is descended from Cain, in which case he deserves to be enslaved. So no matter how bad you have it as a white man who can't even afford to live, and you're probably in worse conditions sometimes than the slave, at least you're not black. And that's what they've created. You see, the colonial mindset is always designed to create the conflict and tension between peoples who ultimately are all enslaved, whether we're in America, whether we're in the Middle East, by these governments that are ultimately empowered by a financial elite, by a corporate elite, that makes profit off of your work and your labor. And rather than ever letting you ally and recognize our shared values, our shared desires, to ultimately be able to feed our families, to be able to create and love and have normal lives and relationships, we have to focus upon our differences, because that's how they maintain the power. So getting back to this question of, okay, Muhammad was the last prophet in this lineage, going back to Abraham, going back before that to Noah, going back to the first man, Adam. The same story here. Islam's story is the same as the story of the Jews, same as the stories of the Christians. There's minimal difference. Okay, I can accept Muhammad as prophet. That makes me a Muslim. But have I changed? Have I become some different person? Well, the media would like you to believe that. The fearmongers would like you to believe that. Now I must be some kind of jihadist. I must be some kind of fanatical. I must have been lost. I was lost, and now I found Islam, and now I've been saved. No, I just came to understand a different point of view. All the colors of the rainbow come from the same place. They all come from the same source. They just take different colors. They take different forms, different frequency. Doesn't mean that they don't come from the same place. So, when I accepted Islam in Iran, I came back, and all of a sudden, I was, frankly, even before that, I'll explain to you that I did this very discreetly. And it was actually a big surprise to me. Because when I accepted it, it was making a step that I didn't realize how big it was at the time. Because I said, makes sense, it's logical. I did it discreetly in Isfahan, in a small city in Iran. And next thing I know, the Reuters reporter is calling me saying, did you convert to Islam? I said, first of all, how do you know? Who's leaking to the press? Okay. Yes, okay, yes, yes. Now, it's becoming a story. I honestly didn't even perceive it. I didn't understand why it was going to be such a big deal. But I took the opportunity, frankly, to go on Bill O'Reilly, to go on Piers Morgan. And many people would have said, well, that he was profiteering from converting to Islam to get some celebrity or press out of it. Like, look, it's probably better celebrity to have a sex tape come out in this day and age than to be seen as a Muslim. Talk about a satanic society, I don't know. I mean, no one criticizes you if you have a sex tape and you become a billionaire off of it, but if you accept Islam, it's like you're the devil. Morals have been reversed. But into this time frame when I came back from Iran, I said, okay, I'll do the Piers Morgan and the Bill O'Reilly because there's an important message that I have to state here about this unification, about this commonality of our religions, of our faith. And into this dialogue, all of a sudden, they kept throwing at me, oh, but you met with Ahmadinejad in Iran. Oh, but Iran is the enemy. But you did it in Iran. They're so dangerous. And all of a sudden, it was part of this whole geopolitical play that I realized. And I said, well, I don't think Iran is as much of a threat as you guys would like us to believe that they are. Well, it turns out that Ahmadinejad didn't nuke anybody, so I guess I was right on that front. And now the Obama administration is negotiating them, which is what I kept urging from the first place. I'm like, why am I the only person over here to talk to these people? Don't you think you're going to get further by having negotiation and dialogue and cultural exchange, economic exchange? Isn't that going to take you a lot further towards any kind of peace than isolation? So I guess I was 2 years ahead of my time in that sense of being over there. But it hasn't gotten better. Being a Muslim in America, in the film business, in Hollywood, I don't think it's gotten better from the point of view of the media. I mean, these statistics showing the amount of Americans who fear that Islam is an inherently violent religion is fascinating to me because you're in the most violent country in the world. I mean, literally, you're in the country that incarcerates the most people, that has the most street violence, I won't say the most street violence, but near the top in street violence. Mexico probably has more next door. You're in a country that troops in 100+ countries around the world. You have actually an uncountable number of wars that are currently taking place at any time. Your whole culture is predicated in violence. Your whole history is predicated in violence, in usurpation, in conquest. And rather than recognizing that, you know what, maybe this isn't the best trajectory for America anymore, that we lost something perhaps after World War II when we were that great savior nation. And since then, we've become a bit of a pariah in the eyes of the rest of the world. Rather than reflecting upon why that is and why we've decided to put all our money into wartime industries, and you look at our cities and they've been gutted of work, and there's no peacetime industries anymore that are invested in. There's no infrastructure that's invested in. There's no maglev rail system being built that could be built out of this city here in Detroit as we speak. Instead, Detroit, which is bankrupt, is being left to bankruptcy and saying, oh, they'll gentrify it. They'll bring in some condos and some, maybe some internet money. And once the whites come in, it'll be fine. That's the mentality. As opposed to saying, hey, we've got this tremendous industry of people and machine tool factories and this history of production that could be put to use in building rail, high-speed rail, that China has, that Japan has, that Europe has, and America, who was the originator of all of this, with our Trans-Pacific Rail construction in the 19th century. We were the innovators of these science and technology initiatives, and now we're being left behind because we can't compete with the rest of the world. You're being lied to. But they keep lying to you because the point is, the power structure is making making a killing off of this wartime industry of missiles and death. And if you're building missiles, you have to shoot them at somebody. So who is that somebody today? Today it's the terrorists. I grew up during the Cold War still. I remember when it was narco-terrorism, and there were the communists, and there were the socialist movements. You see all these different enemies that have to be created, rather than ever letting you as Americans focus on making America great again. Because America can't be great as long as we're pointing missiles and blowing people up. All we're doing is creating enemies, creating fear, perpetuating it, creating hatred. We have to bring ourselves back as a people to this place of oneness, and it begins within ourselves. It's a very difficult experience to explain, but perhaps the most spiritual, I think if you compare spiritual experiences across the world, you'll find that there is this transcendent moment that religion is a part of, and yet spirituality transcends. I know I felt it in certain moments. For example, when I was in Iran, we were having prayer and a chant around the Ashura ceremonies, and many Shia Muslims will understand what that means. The Ashura ceremonies are when we pay homage to the fallen children of the Prophet Muhammad, his grandchildren, Hussein and Hassan. The concept, I'll just mention that many people like to attack Shia Islam as treating Hussein, Ali, and this lineage of Muhammad as being equal to God or equal to the Prophet Muhammad. And it's not about that to me. Perhaps there are extremes, but to me, Shia Islam is remembering those who sacrificed themselves to maintain that which was essential to Islam. Because Islam means submission, submission to God's will. And the spirituality that Islam offers is there for those who seek it, the same way the spirituality of Christianity is there, in Judaism it's there. But sometimes they're more hidden traditions. Sometimes they're more secret because you have to find it for yourself. You have to be willing to go there and seek it within yourself. That hidden tradition is the oneness of all being. It's the oneness that exists within you, so that when you look inside yourself, you realize, I'm not a Muslim, I'm not a Christian, I'm not a Jew, I'm not an American, I'm not this, I'm not that. I am all things. And in these rituals, in these ceremonies, sometimes in the chant, in the prayer, in the moment of connection to that oneness, you start to see it and realize it. Because as long as we use these labels, there are ways of dividing us from each other. And it doesn't matter if I say I'm American, but if I'm American, my tradition, I'm also Irish, I'm also French, I'm also Russian. And then we're before that. And my sister, she's half Korean. You know, and my brother is adopted, but he's Italian. And and you keep going into this, but my best friend is black, and whatever it is, it's like you keep going into this notion of, but these are all part of me too. These people are all part of me as well. And we start getting into this moment of oneness, which is within us, when we recognize it. And then we start to go from that moment realizing all the evils of the world and all the greatness of the world is also within each one of us. It's a question of where we put our emphasis. First and foremost, we have to recognize it. We cannot sit there and be the judge and the Lord of others, as so many people would like to be. They would like to be the chief executioner, the chief commander, and tell you, well, he's right and he's wrong. He lives and he dies. We can get there, but very few of us perhaps should get such a position of power, because first and foremost, before getting to that position, you have to recognize in yourself, if I were in his shoes, would I have done the same thing? Would I see the world the way he does? This is the mission of the artist. This is why the artist's path and job in this world is so important now, perhaps more so than ever. We have to play the role of diplomats. We have to play the role of politicians, because we're the ones who are going to those places in the mind to empathize with the other, to see the world from their point of view. Because only when you see it from the other person's point of view can you start to actually rationalize and talk to that person. Can you actually start to convince anyone away from that position? But first you have to be willing to go there. And when we go there, it's a dangerous place. You can get lost, certainly. I don't feel that my path is anywhere near conclusion. I think my path is evolving. I'm very excited about the fact that I'm at the beginning of my career, but I come from a place that I believe in the oneness of all people, of all things, from the one creation, from the one source. And from that position, I think there's an opportunity for me to create. And I think if everyone recognizes that oneness within themselves, from where they come from, being the one source, then each and every person has the ability to connect, to empathize, and to start to create a better future. That's really where I believe our strength is going to come from. So I want to open it up a little bit to questions.